Let me now get the presentation ready to begin our discussion on third cinema. I hope the presentation is clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yes, so we have an important essay to discuss in the film studies paper. This is a significant essay written in 1969 by two Argentinian filmmakers, Toward a Third Cinema. That is how it has been translated into English. The filmmakers are Fernando Solanas, who passed away recently in the month of December in 2020, owing to COVID, and the other Argentinian filmmaker, Octavio Getino, who passed away in 2012. Now, this is a major essay which defines the emergence of a new kind of cinema. When we mention third cinema, it goes without saying that we have to talk about first cinema and second cinema. Only then can we reach third cinema. First cinema is a term that these critics, these writers, these filmmakers use. These are the two filmmakers who coined the term third cinema. They called it third cinema because they wanted to differentiate it from first and second cinema. The first cinema, according to them, was the cinema of entertainment. It was cinema as an industry that provided entertainment to the masses. It was a cinema that was largely prevalent and made in the developed first world nations, specifically in industries like Hollywood. Therefore, we would not be wrong in assuming that the first cinema is a term that can be used to describe the typical Hollywood movies, the movies that are lavish productions and which provide wholesome entertainment to the viewers, which have a great deal of money pumped into the production by the rich production houses. These are the characteristics of the first world or first cinema. It goes without saying that it is only in rich countries, where the basic needs of the people have already been met, that you can think of entertainment as a mass industry, and therefore first cinema. Now, different from that, you have the emergence of another kind of cinema where it is not entertainment that is the prime focus, but artistic expression. And that cinema is what Solanas and Getino describe as second cinema. In other words, the kind of cinema where the director is in the driving seat. This is not the film that is dictated by the production houses. The producers do not have much of a say in the dynamics of these films. It is not the cinema that is meant to cater to the needs or the demands of the audience. It is different in the sense that here you have the directors trying to convey their artistic expressions. And this is the kind of cinema that you have mainly emerging in some of the European industries, like the French film industry and various other industries also, of course. And because of the many number of European filmmakers like Godard, for example, whose work characterized this kind of artistic cinema, you may call it second cinema or European cinema. I have put up there three images which signify, in a nutshell, what these two kinds of films are all about. The industrial Hollywood films, which are known as first cinema, the auteur cinema, where the director is the auteur, the person who is in charge, like an author, he or she lords over the production of these movies, the second cinema. And then you have the emergence of another kind of film where the impulse is not so much to provide entertainment. It is not also to give the director a room for artistic expression, but this is the kind of film that emerges in countries that are developing, where you need change, where the film becomes a medium for political activism. It is not entertainment, it is not artistic expression, but revolution. That is the focus of this kind of cinema. It is a term that emerged in the context of Argentinian cinema, because it was a term that was coined by Getino and Solanas to Argentinian filmmakers. It is, they wrote this famous essay in the year 1969. Soon after, they made a very different movie called The Hours of the Furnace. We'll talk about that in detail. It is a documentary movie, but a documentary which was unlike any movie that was seen till then. You have the film speaking a new kind of language. It is a kind of film that opens up the way for political change. In other words, you can see the filmmakers here making use of the camera as a weapon, like a gun that can lead a revolution. So it is sometimes also called guerrilla cinema, third world cinema, third cinema, guerrilla cinema, which is totally against the rationale of the other two cinemas, and it acts as a kind of agent of change, fighting against every kind of domination, whether it is colonialism or imperialism or capitalism. Against every kind of domination, the cinema raises a voice, and that is what is known as third cinema. It reinvented filmmaking at every level, with regard to the production, with regard to the way in which the film was shot, the aesthetics, the art, and even the audience. Every aspect of filmmaking was totally, radically changed, revolutionized by these filmmakers, and it has, seen its influence being wielded in various industries across the world. So that is what third cinema is. First cinema, I have explained in the slide, Hollywood production model that idealizes bourgeois values. It is the values of the privileged, the people who have enough and more. And the audience here remains a passive audience which just accepts whatever is provided by these films for entertainment. It is a kind of spectacle, a large-scale spectacle where you have individual characters who loom large on the screen and who provide a kind of escapist spectacle, actually, to the audience. The audience identifies with these large heroic characters, and you have a kind of escapism that they engage in, which is the reason for the success of this first cinema. Then you have the second cinema, the European art film, which rejects Hollywood conventions, but is very much focused on the individual artistic expression of the auteur director. In any case, both of these can be seen as individual engagements. The first cinema, the engagement of the directors who want to provide entertainment to the audience by the big support, and that is given by the rich producers who actually control the production. They dictate the terms. The second cinema, where the director tells his or her own way of, tells a story in his or her own way. And then the third cinema, the non-commercialized cinema, which challenges both the Hollywood and the European model, and it rejects the view of cinema as a vehicle for personal expression, as was seen in second cinema. And here, the director is not an individual, but is part of a collective. Everything is a collective venture, the production, the direction, and the viewing too. It is something that appeals to the masses by inspiring revolutionary activism in there. And even it's not, as I told you, it's not just the making, the production and the direction that is different and revolutionary. Even the act of watching has activism in it, because it is made secretly, the film is made secretly, rebelling against the establishment, and even the screening has to be done and is done in a very clandestine or secretive manner, where even the watching of the movie by the audience is an act of rebellion. It is a risk-taking on their part. So that is why even at the level of the audience, you have change here. So they argue that traditional exhibition models need to be avoided. They do not show it in a grand theater as first cinema or second cinema would be shown. They would show it in dark alleys, in private, spaces where, it is with a great deal of risk that the audience would conglomerate to watch the movies. So, as I told you, this is a 1969 essay. The full title is Towards a Third Cinema, Notes and Experiences for the Development of a Cinema of Liberation in the Third World. So that was the subtitle that they gave to this essay. And that makes it clear. It is something that, tries to create a cinema of liberation, liberating the people and the land from every kind of domination, from the capitalist, from the military, from the imperialist, from the colonialist. If films can liberate, can spread that spirit of rebellion, revolution, you may call it third cinema. Okay, so this is the movie, the 1968 movie, The Hour of the Furnaces. Of course, it was made in Spanish, which was the language of Argentina, or which is the main language of Argentina. And this film, this 1968 film made by Getino and Solanas, it is a very different kind of film, a subversive political documentary. It was produced by a group. As I told you, there is never at any stage any individual venture here. Everything is done by a collective. And you have in Argentina at that point of time, a group of filmmakers who wanted to create a new kind of film, which would, stand against the military that was at that time in power. So following a coup, a military coup, a military battalion had come into power, overthrowing the reign of Perón, the former president. And these filmmakers, they call themselves the Grupo Cine Liberación, the Cinema for Liberation group. And apart from Fernando Solanas and Octavio Getino, there were a few others. We'll see their names. And, this film was so radical, when it was made. It produced a kind of explosive atmosphere. And, it was particularly significant at that point of time when not just Argentina, but the whole of South America, that entire continent of Latin America, and a large section of the world, the third world, in other parts of the world too. You had these, the people were burdened with underdevelopment and cultural dependency, paralleled by the swelling of militant movements and organized protests. So 1960s the latter half of the 1960s, in various parts of the world, you have a great deal of movements, student movements, for example, in Paris, and movements for liberation in various parts of the world. And it is in that context that you need to see the emergence of this movement in Argentina. This is a poster, which again indicates how much of a collective the whole production is. It was, something that emerged as a textbook case, just as you may consider Battleship Potemkin as a textbook case of Soviet montage, Bicycle Thieves as a textbook case of Italian neorealism. The Hour of the Furnaces can be seen as the paradigm of revolutionary activist cinema. As Gaetano said, for the first time, we demonstrated that it was possible to produce and distribute a film in a non-liberated country, a country that was still not free, where the people were not free, with the specific aim of contributing to the political process of liberation. So that was the aim of this film. It was very, very political in its form, in its content, in its impulse, in its expression. It aimed at political liberation. It was, however, you should not brush the cinema aside as mere activism. It had a lot of artistic merits too. It was very original. The kind of techniques that had never been seen before were employed in the making of this, as we will see. This is not the movie that is prescribed for our study, but we cannot discuss third cinema. We cannot discuss this manifesto of third cinema, toward a third cinema, that manifesto, without referring to The Hour of the Furnace. It's considered as a diptych. A diptych is a painting where you have two panels. In one here you have the film, and soon after that, in a few months after the making of the film, they felt the need, they felt the urge to write this essay too. So it's just a continuation of the film. What the film tried to convey on screen, this essay tries to convey in words. It's an extension of it. It's not just an act of courage, it's also a formal synthesis, a theoretical essay, and the origin of several contemporary image practices. And it stands out for the powerful balance between its strong literary structure and its many audiovisual innovations. These establish the film as a central reference for activist cinema. Yeah, so as I told you about the military coup of 1966 in Argentina, which overthrew the Perón government. And this film was very, very cautious, in its making. It was very cautious of the hugely restrictive atmosphere that prevailed everywhere in the country. And so they could not actually complete the film or the production of the film in Argentina. A good deal of it was actually filmed in Italy. And they call this, when you read the essay, you will find how they call it not filmmaking. It's a film act. That is how they use the term, a film act. They refer to its radical digression from all the conventionally held notions of cinema. It is a radical separation from all the prevalent notions about films. Yeah, and in the when you say that it was the production of a collective, we also need to take into account the large-scale involvement of the working class, people who were working in factories and so on. The film was actually first presented to them, and their opinion was very much taken into consideration before it was finally released. So we need to talk about the group that made this film, the Grupo Cine Liberación, the Liberation Film Group, which had as its major, leaders, one can say, the filmmakers, Vallejo, Gerardo Vallejo, then Octavio Gaetano, and Fernando Solanas. They are here seen in the company of Perón, the Juan Domingo Perón, the Argentinian president, who was overthrown by the military in 1966. So You have Solanus and Gatineau flanking Perron in this picture. The person on extreme left is Vallejo. Yeah, so this film, The Hour of the Furnaces, it is a long documentary. It runs into 208 minutes and it's divided into two parts. It was made as, you must definitely take some time to watch this movie, which is now freely available on YouTube, The Hour of the Furnaces. The first runs into 88 minutes and the second in 120 minutes. And the whole thing can be divided into three sections. The first one, part one, notes and testimonies on neocolonialism, violence, and liberation. You'll find you need to see the movie to experience the way it has been presented. You have a lot of quotations from some of the major thinkers, critics, revolutionaries, like you have Che Guevara, you have Fanon, Frantz Fanon, just to name two names that you might be familiar with, and a lot of others too. And real footage, from revolutions in many parts of South America. The second part is called Act for Liberation, and the third is Violence and Liberation. So these are the three parts that make up this movie. It is a comprehensive analysis of the history, the geography, the economy, sociology, ideology, culture, religion, and daily life of Latin America. So, it's just very much like a film or a movie like War and Peace, for example. You cannot limit it to one theme or one story or one actor or central character. It is a lot of these put together. And each dimension and source of oppression is documented, and each link between the determination and their consequences. So you have, as I told you, quotations from various thinkers, rebels, revolutionaries, newspaper headlines. All of these, are included in the footage. So you have the quotations from the Cuban revolutionary leader, Jose Marti. Actually, the phrase "hour of the furnace" comes from Jose Marti. Then other Argentinian rebels like Raul Ortiz, Che Guevara, Frantz Fanon, Aimé Césaire, both of whom we've already discussed in the context of negritude, the negritude movement. And then the Peruvian revolutionary poet and leader, Jose Carlos Mariátegui, whose analysis of Peru's situation was actually the first systematic attempt to adapt Marxist concepts and methodology to a Latin American context. With that, we can understand that this is a radical leftist-leaning film movement. It is totally against the military establishment, totally against any right-wing thinking, and very much leftist in its orientation, very much inspired by Marxist thinking. So they decent the notion of the author, and everything takes on a collective dimension. And there is a kind of open-endedness. It's not as if the film, as if the plot is worked out to a proper structure. You have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then, that kind of linearity is missing here. It is the whole text of the film is open, and it insists on the participatory involvement from the audience. The audience can react, the audience can call for change in the filming, in the storyline, in the script, and so on. And the film ends actually with a very provocative line. Now it's up to you to draw conclusions to continue the film. You have the floor. So the film does not end there. It continues. It is just passed over to the audience, and they continue the action that was seen on the screen. What is that? Revolution. So exhorting the people to take up arms in order to change the situation that the film itself rebelled against. So the films do not have a proper closure, defying closure. This film actually, it shifts the responsibility to the audience and asks them to take on and take off from where the film pauses. So it engraves its ideas on the spectator's mind. The images do not explode harmlessly, dissipating their energy, fusing with ideas. They detonate in the minds of the audience. It is like, a wave of change created in the mind of the audience. So as I told you, it is a beautiful combination of fierce political action and also artistic experimentation. You have a whole lot of new styles, original styles being experimented from, therefore, this quotation, I think, sums it up, from didacticism, that is trying to teach, to operatic stylization, almost like an opera. An opera is one that involves a large group. An opera can never be performed by a single person. So stylistically, it has many features of the opera. At the same time, it tries to teach and to make people take up arms against the establishment. And you cannot. You encounter so many different styles. At times you find that it is very documentary. It's almost like reading a newspaper. At other times, it's like reading an advertisement. At other times, you have photographs, still photographs, then testimonials, people coming and speaking, footage from books, film clips, from avant-garde and mainstream fiction and documentary. Everything is woven into this, the hour of the furnace, and it has rightly been described as a militant, poetic, epic tapestry. It is militant, at the same time poetic too. And because of its immense scope, it is epic in its trajectory. It's like a tapestry. Tapestry is a large panel where you have plenty of designs and motifs. That is what is known as a tapestry. And this film is very much like that kind of a tapestry. And each screening was a risk. It was filmed in a kind of space, which can be considered as a decolonized, liberated space. And even during the the screening of the movie, in between they would stop the screening for as long as necessary to get the audience to participate, to allow them to discuss, debate, and so on. And as Mariano Messman, one of the film critics, says, he recalls the several screenings that led to military confrontations. To attend a screening was in itself a political act, transforming spectators into responsible historical subjects, not because they did or did not agree with the content of the film, but by virtue of the very decision to attend despite the threat. It was banned, and yet these films were made and watched. Yeah, this is more about the films. I've just taken a few quotations from a few critics to show you how revolutionary this kind of film was and how original it was. The kind of components that go into the making of this film. You can read it on your own. Yeah, that is why I told you it is considered as an invisible diptych with Solanas and Gatineau's essay toward a third cinema, notes and experiences for the development of a cinema of liberation in the third world. Yeah, this is some more explanation about the third cinema. Yeah, I'll stop here for the moment. We'll continue from this point in the next class. But before that, I would like you to take a good look at this documentary in YouTube. I'll put the link. You can browse the net yourself. In any case, add the link to your classroom. At least get a taste of it, just to see how it is made, and how different it is from conventional films. And that will enable us to understand better the essay. okay, which was an extension of the film. Okay, I'll stop for the moment now. Now, we'll continue from this point in the next class.
Okay, ma'am.
Thank you, miss.